Palancar Valley. The sun rose the next morning with a glorious conflagration of pink and yellow. The air was fresh, sweet, and very cold. Ice edged the streams and small pools were completely frozen over. After a breakfast of porridge, Eragon returned to the glen and examined the charred area. The morning light revealed no new details, so he started for home. The rough game trail was faintly worn and in places non-existent. Because it had been forged by animals, it often backtracked and took long detours. Yet for all its flaws, it was still the fastest way out of the mountains. The Spine was one of the only places that King Galbatorix could not call his own. Stories were still told about how half his army disappeared after marching into its ancient forest. A cloud of misfortune and bad luck seemed to hang over it. Though the trees grew tall and the sky shone brightly, few people could stay in the Spine for long without suffering an accident. Eragon was one of those few, not through any particular gift, it seemed to him, but because of persistent vigilance and sharp reflexes. He had hiked in the mountains for years, yet he was still wary of them. Every time he thought they had surrendered their secrets, something happened to upset his understanding of them, like the stone's appearance. He kept up a brisk pace, and the leagues steadily disappeared. In late evening, he arrived at the edge of a precipitous ravine. The Enora River rushed by far below, heading to Palancar Valley. Gorged with hundreds of tiny streams, the river was a brute force, battling against the rocks and boulders that barred its way. A low rumble filled the air. He camped in a thicket near the ravine and watched the moon rise before going to bed. It grew colder over the next day and a half. Eragon travelled quickly and saw little of the wary wildlife. A bit past noon, he heard the Igawalda Falls blanketing everything with the dull sound of 1,000 splashes. The trail led him onto a moist slate outcropping, which the river sped past, flinging itself into empty air and down mossy cliffs. Before him lay Palancar Valley, exposed like an unrolled map. The base of the Igawalda Falls, more than a half-mile below, was the northernmost point of the valley. A little ways from the falls was Carvajal, a cluster of brown buildings. White smoke rose from the chimneys, defiant of the wilderness around it. At this height, farms were small square patches no bigger than the end of his finger. The land around them was tan or sandy, where dead grass swayed in the wind. The Enora River wound from the falls toward Palancar's southern end, reflecting great strips of sunlight. Far in the distance, it flowed past the village Therinsford and the lonely mountain Utgard. Beyond that, he knew only that it turned north and ran to the sea. After a pause, Eragon left the outcropping and started down the trail, grimacing at the descent. When he arrived at the bottom, soft dusk was creeping over everything, blurring colours and shapes into grey masses. Carvajal's lights shimmered nearby in the twilight. The houses cast long shadows. Aside from Therinsford, Carvajal was the only village in Palancar Valley. The settlement was secluded and surrounded by harsh, beautiful land. Few travelled here, except merchants and trappers. The village was composed of stout log buildings with low roofs, some thatched, others shingled. Smoke billowed from the chimneys, giving the air a woody smell. The buildings had wide porches where people gathered to talk and conduct business. Occasionally, a window brightened as a candle or lamp was lit. Eragon heard men talking loudly in the evening air, while wives scurried to fetch their husbands, scolding them for being late. Eragon wove his way between the houses to the butcher's shop, a broad, thick-beamed building. Overhead, the chimney belched black smoke. He pushed the door open. The spacious room was warm and well lit by a fire snapping in a stone fireplace. A bare counter stretched across the far side of the room. The floor was strewn with loose straw. Everything was scrupulously clean, as if the owner spent his leisure time digging in obscure crannies for minuscule pieces of filth. Behind the counter stood the butcher, Sloane. A small man, he wore a cotton shirt and a long blood-stained smock. An impressive array of knives swung from his belt. He had a sallow, pock-marked face, and his black eyes were suspicious. He polished the counter with a ragged cloth. Sloane's mouth twisted as Eragon entered. Well, the mighty hunter joins the rest of us mortals. How many did you bag this time? None, was Eragon's curt reply. He had never liked Sloane. The butcher always treated him with disdain, as if he was something unclean. A widower, Sloane seemed to care for only one person, his daughter Katrina, on whom he doted. "I'm amazed," said Sloane with affected astonishment. He turned his back on Eragon to scrape something off the wall. "And that's your reason for coming here?" "Yes," admitted Eragon uncomfortably. "If that's the case, let's see your money." Sloane tapped his fingers when Eragon shifted his feet and remained silent. "Come on, either you have it or you don't. Which is it?" "I don't really have any money, but I do—" "What, no money?" The butcher cut him off sharply. "And you expect to buy meat? Are the other merchants giving away their wares? Should I just hand you the goods without charge? Besides," he said abruptly, "it's late. Come back tomorrow with money. I'm closed for the day." Eragon glared at him. "I can't wait until tomorrow, Sloane. It'll be worth your while, though. I found something to pay you with." He pulled out the stone with a flourish and set it gently on the scarred counter, where it gleamed with light from the dancing flames. "Stole it is more likely," muttered Sloane, leaning forward with an interested expression. Ignoring the comment, Eragon asked, "Will this be enough?"